All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Serve Brew. Cheers. Got the
Yes.
coffee today. Um, cool. So today I'm so excited. We are talking about all things Easter. Easter's right around the corner. It is a very special time to get to make a difference in our community, people's lives. There's just something really special about it. But why? Why is Easter so special? I don't know. We're going to find out today because I have one of the best, my favorite people on the planet. She has like helped raise me like since I was a child in outreach. She would pick me up before I could drive, bring me down to Dream Center Land, and we would knock on doors. She'd teach me just how to love people and just really like narrate the sights that we saw and the people. And she just showed me how to love. Like she's Mother Teresa for real, like the 21st century Mother Teresa. So I love you so much, Charity. Charity Trahan, welcome to the Serve Brew.
Thank you so much, Tori. You're too kind. I think you're Mother Teresa for sure. You're awesome. Yes, I'm so excited to be here and talk about all things outreach and right back at you, Tori. Just watching you all these years, it's awesome. I know it's only the beginning for you and everything you're involved with. I think the next 20 years in outreach in local church is going to be huge. I think it's going to blow our minds. I think really it's only the beginning. So I'm excited to be here.
Agreed. I'm so excited too. That's awesome. It's always weird having like your mentors on an interview because they dote on you, and it's like, no, 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 I'm here to dote on you. Stop that. Oh my gosh,
No, I have
mushy.
to, Tori.
Anyway, thanks, Charity. Okay, so background, Charity Trahan has been part of Servolution since before Servolution started. She goes back farther than anything, but like since day one has been in Baton Rouge, helped with trafficking efforts, dream center efforts, local outreach efforts, all the things. She has a crazy journey and she's just been doing it for years. So I'm going to let you tell us about your adventure and how you've weaved through so many
Okay.
experiences, Charity. But first, let's do a little icebreaker. What's your coffee of choice? What do you order at Starbucks?
So I am a Frappuccino girl. My husband laughs at me. He's like black coffee with 4 shots of espresso in it. He's hardcore. And I am like the dainty, like Frappuccino with whipped cream. Other than that, that's the only coffee I drink. I only drink it if I'm desperate. But like right now, I have Earl Gray tea. So I'm a tea lover. So I feel like I appreciate British culture. I wish in America we could do tea and crumpets every day. I feel like that would be awesome. I feel like my life needs like regular tea time, so I get to have it right now. So I'm happy.
Yeah, I remember being in Africa with you on a trip, and I woke up and you were playing like French music, like
Yeah, it's so true.
European vibe. I was like, "We're in Africa. What are you doing?"
So
So
funny about that is in my young early, I'm 40 now, believe it or not. When I was like 20, I was determined I'm going to be a missionary to Europe. I loved it. And I always joke because I have a friend who I grew up with, and she is all American girl, loves the US. And she actually lives in Greece and works in ministry and has been there for many years in Europe. And I've literally been, I don't think I've gone on a mission trip in years and been in the US focused on outreach. So I think it's funny. It's kind of a little
oh,
God joke
that's funny. The
where
perfect
how
time.
life happens. Yeah.
You
But
got
I
your Earl Grey
appreciate the
tea to get your
culture.
fix.
Yes.
Oh, that's hilarious. I
Yes.
love it. The
Mhm.
Frappuccino way. It's
Yes.
it's a dessert for you. That's awesome.
Exactly. Mhm.
Okay, so give us like a snapshot of Charity. We know that you're European obsessed, but you're stuck local, and that's cool. Fun facts. Tell us about your family that I love, your Enneagram type, all that good stuff.
Yes. So, like I said, I am 40. I have amazing, awesome, handsome husband, Paul, who does not like to be doted on, but he's awesome. And I actually met him on outreach. So we started outreach at the Dream Center at the same time together. I'm originally from St. Louis. I started working at Joyce Meyer Ministries at a really young age. Like Tori, I got started young. I think I was 16 when I first got involved with youth ministry and just answering phone calls, doing anything like that. And then it was when I was about 21, I would say, I started working at the St. Louis Dream Center that Joyce Meyer Ministries founded. And I just remember calling a friend and saying, I found my people. So I had always just had a heart to serve. I didn't know, I had never seen anything like a dream center or an outreach. And as soon as I was there, I was like, man, I never want to leave. I just want to be here all the time. And it was just like that God moment. And that's where I met my husband. He was an intern there. And we literally met in the streets, and that's where we would have conversations. And we've been married 16 years now, and we have 2 boys. I'm a boy mom, and I love it. So I have a 12-year-old and a 4-year-old. So that is a little bit of my history. My husband, he has been serving, like I said, serving alongside of me. He also there's some business things that he does. He works in the stock market. He's the smart one in the family. So we really have a heart to serve and be boots on the ground, but as well to bring in resources for outreach. So that's kind of the dual purpose in our family, is to resource and support, and to be there. So fun facts about me. I busted myself about my European obsession, kind of embarrassing, but I love it. My grandparents were missionaries to Sweden. So I grew up getting pictures taken in this cute little Swedish outfit. So I guess the European influence has always been there. And so I would say that's a fun fact, is grandchild of missionaries. I grew up not understanding what was happening then, but always hearing amazing stories. And I think that kind of sparked something, in me at a young age, to really think you can take off the boundaries and do anything for Jesus. I would just hear these crazy stories. And I think that's one thing that I so appreciate about my family history. So personality, I know Enneagram a little bit. I'm just learning. I'm, as probably many outreach people are, a peacekeeper, a 9, and a challenger, and swing 8. I don't know about you, Tori, but that's where I am.
No
So
way. I would have thought you were a 7, like the
really,
enthusiast.
okay.
You have an 8 wing, that makes so much sense, though.
Yes,
Wow,
I like
cool.
to bring everyone together and then challenge everybody.
That's a great combination.
Yep.
That's crazy. I
Yeah.
love it. Oh my gosh, Charity, you're amazing. All of you guys, like, if you ever get a chance to hang out with her, like, it is the most adventurous, fun, colorful thing of your whole life. Like, seriously, amazing. And Paul, too. Paul
Mhm.
is like super quiet, but he's like sharp and hilarious. So he'll like slide in these jokes, and you're like, whoa, where'd that come from?
That is
But
so
he's
true.
got the biggest heart, and he'll just be like loving on people no matter what. It's amazing. So y'all's
Mhm.
family is my favorite in the world. We love y'all.
Yes.
Okay, so you told us about you've been in St. Louis Dream Center, you started there. Like that's the OG of outreach for
Mhm.
real. Best place. Tell me like a little more. I know you have worked in Baton Rouge, you worked in Memphis, that's where you're at now. Like kind of weave us through some of your outreach experience,
Mhm.
what you've seen, we've worked in.
Yeah, definitely. So, like I said, we met, my husband and I met in St. Louis, and in St. Louis, that's where I kind of discovered street outreach. I was involved particularly with women's ministry, even at my young age. I worked at a women's home for women coming at that time out of prostitution, we called it. That's where I got introduced to the issue of human trafficking. And I would say that's an issue, once you're involved with it, for me, it's never left me. So I've done that in different avenues. I can speak to probably for the past 15 years, been involved with that. So I also learned how to do youth ministry there. Again, that's one of my favorite things is youth ministry. My husband and I in St. Louis, we would open the door on Friday nights to all the unchurched kids and have a few hundred kids come up and hang out while their parents were getting, going to an addiction recovery meeting. And so I feel like my time in St. Louis is where God really, shaped the calling, and where I really kind of realized my husband, he just kind of was so amazed at what he saw. He grew up, and I always say, leave it to Beaver family. If you know his family, he's one of 6. They're all really close and love each other. And it was just like, wow, the things that are out in the world, he just didn't know that there's the different hardships and the things that he had seen. So, yeah, he just, committed the rest of his life to doing something about that. So we were there. I worked at Joyce Meyer Ministries for 10 years. And from there, my husband's from Louisiana and the Cajun Mafia. And I moved to Healing Place, and we to Louisiana, Baton Rouge, and worked at Healing Place for 10 years. And really, like Tori said, helped with all things outreach. I remember when Servolution got started there and all the awesome moments we had, and just kind of the fun things. And I can tell you, I've learned a lot along the way. There's some outreaches that I've along the way, I was like, oh man, that was a learning lesson. So I think that was huge. They had 2 dream centers. I helped plant one, and was just there from the beginning to help build it up. Again, involved with human trafficking. We started homeless youth outreach, and to this day, it's going good and going strong. We we partner with the foster care system and realized that particularly young boys were the least wanted coming out of the system, and that in Louisiana there's a huge need for youth as they age out of the foster care system. So we work, and the team continues to work to this day with the foster care system to advocate towards adoption and work, how can we change the system, how can we come alongside and help as a church, which is huge, that the church can be looked at as a solution for government, and say how can we help these youth, and then open a boys home and spent hours and hours on outreach and adopt a block, and just many years doing that. And I think street outreach is still my favorite. I love it. I can do it. Just plot me anywhere on a street with anything, and it'll be fun. I'll have fun. So did that for 10 years, and then my husband and I spent a season, probably the past 6 years, where there's a couple churches we really felt, I almost felt like a missionary in that way. Help with some outreach things. We were at I-5 City for a few years in Baltimore. And I think one thing I really learned, I feel like God's put me on this journey where I've worked from the Midwest. I've lived in the South and done outreach, and then was in the Northeast. And I can honestly say that, outreach looks the same everywhere. Being in the up east, one thing I notice is that sometimes it's even easier if it's not a Bible Belt area, because there's no point of reference for church. And so I think that it was cool to see that really outreach can happen anywhere, in any situation, in any culture or influence. So was there to help them start a nonprofit they were starting. I did a lot of years in the area of grant writing and things like that as well. So help support them. And I love Jimmy and Irene Rollins. They're awesome. Good people, know them, check them out. They're risk takers. I love that. Outreach risk takers. So awesome people, help them. And we moved a little closer to home and been at Life Church for the past few years and really helping them. Again, they awesome vision, want to plant 4 dream centers in one city. So is amazing, a huge challenge, and be able to come alongside and serve in any way I can there. And I think was telling Tori this past year in 2020, I think it's been a huge shift for our family. The business stuff that my husband does has picked up a lot. And so I've come alongside to support him and really feel God calling me to really support the Big C church. What can I do to come along and cheer everybody on? I think one thing I've learned being in outreach for 20 years is support is so huge when you're an outreach worker. And so anything I can do to help support and strengthen and provide growth. I always call it the seed effect, which is strategy, education, encouragement, and development. Those are things I feel like everybody needs in outreach. Those are things I needed, and people poured into me and supported me. And that's the reason I could do it for 20 years. I think that seed, is really important. So in a season with everything I've learned, just to be able to come along and support and like I told Tori earlier before we started this chat, that I think it's only the beginning. I think that, there's so much conversation about revival and things happening in our globe. And I really think outreach is part of that. I think the more and more we realize what we can do as a community, in our community as a church, that we're going to continue to be more and more on the forefront. So I think it's really the beginning, even just from when I started in 20 years ago to where it is today. It just blows my mind when I step back and think about it, and how even just the next generation coming up, just how awesome and just radical, a good radical and risk-taking they are to serve the community. So I'm excited. So I hope that kind of gives me a brief. Again, I could talk all day about outreach, and I would say in a nutshell, I'm somebody who's worked in every area. So I was always passionate about how can I build the whole in the local church. And there's a few things that people do talk to me about a lot when it comes to human trafficking and foster care and things like that. Spent a lot of years in that. But I think, always willing to do whatever's needed to push it forward, because I think ultimately it's about bringing hope. And so hope you can do with any type of method or any type of outreach. So that's a little bit about me.
Wow. That was a really great nutshell. What I love about you, Charity, is like you're almost like an entire ecosystem inside of yourself. Like it's so wild to me because you just like you understand the big picture in like you
Mhm.
can just perceive all of it and you see how it works together, but you're also so in touch and hands-on and like you
Yeah,
can zoom into the one and how are they being affected by the whole thing. And
yeah.
that blows my mind. And that on top of all the experience that you have literally in every area of outreach and your passion to like you said, invest in people who are also in the trenches with others or trying to figure out their strategies. Like it's just you're such a rare mindset person, it's amazing with a compassionate heart. You're not just the brain, but you're the heart too. And that doesn't always come from
Mhm.
everybody. So I think you're such a blessing. And yeah, you're like mother of outreach. For sure. Mother Teresa, mother of outreach, all those things. But yes, so
Tori too.
really, we need to do a whole series with Charity on surf philosophy and all of that. But I invited you to talk about Easter outreach just because you're a genius and know everything, but also like because of your understanding of all the angles and all the perspectives, I feel like you could really speak some dynamic truth and wisdom into why is outreach such a strategic time? Why is it so important for churches or dream centers to be
Yeah.
really active in this season? So, yeah, let's talk about that. Like why do you think that Easter is a prime time for outreach?
Well, I think a couple of reasons. One reason I know, and I again, Tori, I love Easter outreach. I think it is one of the prime outreaches every year. There's been awesome things I've been able to see, and I think with it, the old adage that says people who don't go to church, they'll come at Christmas and Easter. So that's something we all know and we all talk about. In our if you're part of a church staff or a volunteer, something we talk about. So I think it's a prime time that people are willing to step out and attend church or even be interested in talking to church. So I think Easter and Christmas are huge because of that. And I also think when it comes to outreaches and trying new ideas, wrapping it around a holiday is a great win and a way to get in the door. So I think sometimes if you have an idea and you're approaching somebody about it, whether it's somebody in the community or a neighborhood or a school or, the mayor's office or however big you're wanting to go, I think doing it around a holiday sometimes is a real easy yes. So I think I've always loved launching outreaches around then. And I also think as far as volunteers, it's a great time because people really are around holidays, thinking about serving more. I know Christmas is probably the biggest one that people think about that, but Easter is another one that I think people really, they're even, you're thinking about who can I bring to church? Your family may be coming to church with you. You're automatically thinking about the unchurched or people who aren't part of a community. So I think those are some big reasons why it's prime time. And I think it's a good time also to launch something new within your church and build a momentum because during holidays, you'll get a big volunteer turnout because there's people make room for that. And I think, especially since if you're new to outreach and you're nervous, a holiday outreach, because we're all nervous. I get nervous when I start a new outreach after 20 years, when you have that, just like you're overcoming the little butterflies and taking that risk to step out. I think around holidays seems like a good, safe time, to really to step out and do something with your family. So, and then a lot of people are off school. A lot of kids are off school around Easter potentially. I know my kids are. Depending on the state, sometimes their spring break is around Easter, so it's a good time to serve as a family as well.
Yeah, those are all really great factors, and
Mhm.
yes, it's all so true, and just
Mhm.
kind of is a sweet time, like, yeah, why not lean into such a great opportunity? Um,
Yes.
so, okay, just to get people, like, kind of in the zone, in the mode, give
Yeah.
us, like, top 10 Easter ideas that you've seen happen, maybe you planned or you were part of. I know I-5, you all did some magical stuff. Me and my husband Josh flew in for Red Week, and you planned, like, a week solid of outreaches, and it was just a blast. But yeah, tell us like some of your favorite, most creative outreaches and why.
Yes. Well, Red Week or Serve Week, I know we did some at Healing Place too, is awesome. Like that was probably my number one thing that I loved. I think Pastor Jimmy had this idea of doing a week of serving, which they still do leading up to Easter, and I was able to come alongside and just support that. That is really huge because I believe that again, like I said, this is a good time to onboard new volunteers. And it feels safe and comfortable to do it around holidays. So to really kind of just build momentum, just to be able to on the internal side with volunteers, just blast out outreaches every day, so people can just set aside that week. I know people did it as a missions trip locally where they took off work and they're like, we're going to serve all week, and is it awesome, especially with young adults and things like that. So I think that is really important. And then in the community leading up to Easter, to be able to see a sea of shirts spread out all throughout and canvas throughout the city. I know we wore red shirts or whatever. A lot of people wear serve shirts. Just to have that all in the community leading up to Easter, I think is just huge to really be able to make that splash in the community. For Red Week and Serve Week, each year we had a theme. So one year we were focused on homeless. We were launching homeless outreaches. We had a mobile shower truck that we were launching. So we wanted to use that as a way to specifically kind of get people warmed up to the idea. And they hadn't had a homeless ministry at the church there. So we did it straight solid for a week. And because it was in a cold area, we actually were able to provide winter shelter for the week and then do outreaches in the community and really focused around that whole week just with a theme. So we've done a Serve Week where we were going to start a new adopt-a-block in the neighborhood. So we thought, okay, we're going to come in a big way and just show up and every day do different activities within that neighborhood. You can do, how back in the old days, you used to invite you used to get, like a neighbor moved in, you bring them an apple pie. We did it in reverse, where we'd bring them pies, just welcome ourselves to the neighborhood and just create a big splash. So I think, so that's a lot of fun. We've done shopping sprees. There was some after school program we're involved with. We did shopping sprees for the kids. That's probably one of my favorite that we've done. Easter basket giveaways are so awesome because I feel like some kids, depending on what focus areas, but if maybe there's some kids who their families financially have a hard time with Easter, I think that is awesome. Easter egg hunt in their front yards. I know the special needs Easter egg hunt. I'm sure that Tori is the master of that. That's one of my favorites, especially the foster care youth, seeing them be able to participate. But if they're not, but even especially right now in the time of COVID, I've seen where you do Easter egg hunts in front yards. So it's kind of like, that old adage where you would teepee someone's front yard, but not teepee him, but shower them with Easter eggs. So they'd wake up in the morning, their kids can run out and get Easter eggs. So that's some great adopt-a-block type outreaches. I think really serving the vulnerable during a week like this is a great opportunity in the sense of maybe some like the foster care youth, families that they may have a relative in prison, things like that are really that they're not going to be reached otherwise has been some of my favorite. So shopping sprees, I love to shop. So that one was like amazing. I love shopping sprees. I think one thing that's important too during Easter outreach is to make sure and keep it simple enough. So there is a side to my brain, and Tori knows this well, where I love to say, okay, let's sit down and say, how can we solve hunger in our city? So there is a time and place for that. And that's huge because I believe that as a church, we can talk about those things and we can lower those issues, that we are capable to and able to do it. But I also think during a week like this leading up to Easter, because it is a lot of new volunteers, keeping it as simple as possible. Because I believe, like, for example, I know all of us love volunteer signups. I'm an advocate for volunteer signups, like pre-registering, but I also think leaving room for people who may be unchurched and just attending church. They may not know our church ecosystem and know, oh, I got to go volunteer and sign up. So creating simple outreaches that you can accommodate people in case they do show up with simple timeframes. Those things are really important. So I always love during Easter to have those simple moments, even to be able to push some of the volunteers out there. I've had so many people over the years who said, man, Sherry, you pushed me out to pray for that person. I never would have prayed out loud. I never, having it simple enough where you can use that opportunity to let volunteers kind of step out in the little ways, because that will help build their faith, which will build your team, long term. So let's see, other outreaches. Serving teachers is probably one of my favorite things. I know with COVID right now, around Easter, I think it's great if your teachers aren't in school, find a way to drop something at their front door. These are things that normally you can do year round, but I think just around the holidays are really important. Even for the kids, I know here in Memphis, the kids have been out of school and have been doing virtual learning. So drive-through Easter crafts that families could pick up and have things for their families. Things like that. I think it's also important to stay relevant to the issues that are happening in the city, especially right now, because as a church, we want to make sure that we are connected. That makes sense. So that they know that as a church, we're not, over here in our own bubble, that they know that we see them. So for instance, right now in Memphis, there's the water issues is similar to what you see in Texas. And so if things like that, make sure that I would always make sure to include those types of things if it's falling on the holiday week. So, because I think it's important to connect into the medium emergency serve. So So yeah, if it's a water giveaway, things like that, I think are really important. One of my favorite things, this is um, something we're working on at I-5, and I know that we weren't able to totally get it, but I get to it completely. But if the first church that can pull this off, I'll be so excited. I'll be right there. I may drive over there and be there with you, but a 24-hour serve, which a lot of people have done, but live streaming it, I think is huge. Anything that builds momentum in Easter. I find that Easter outreaches have sometimes been the biggest time to build volunteers and expose people to it. And so a 24-hour live stream serve. So where outreach is going out every hour and it's being live streamed, I think would be awesome and amazing. And so the 24-hour serve, though, if you can't live stream it, is awesome. And I think the young adult ministries love that too, and having them kind of spearhead that. So, and kind of living on the edge. And so with that, we did every hour on the hour, and outreach left the church. So you just showed up at a time slot and you were sent out. And it may be simple as serving restaurant workers. That's one of my favorite things to do, especially around the holidays, going to Waffle Houses and giving them gifts, things like that, because I think that's really important, especially in the time of COVID. I know it's really important for our restaurant workers and our grocery workers and things like that. So, so yeah, these have been some of the ones that have been favorite. I think to kind of bring it all together. The serve week is awesome if you can do that. I think Easter is probably the best time of the year to do a serve week that I've seen out of all the times to do it. So I think that's huge. And I think the special needs Easter egg hunt is probably if I would say my number one. I love that one. That's awesome. Those two things are awesome.
I love it. Brilliant. My paper is full, like completely full. Thank you so much. Those are great ideas. And yeah, like as you're talking, I'm picturing all of them. And it's just, there's so many beautiful expressions and opportunities. And
Yes.
like bringing it all together in a week makes so much sense because, like we've seen in COVID, our big events are great, but like having things broken down so much and
Mhm.
spaced out has, like you said, it's given like a simplicity to it that's allowed margin to where there's more personal connection that
Mhm.
can happen. It's less, which it can happen in a big event because you're still breaking things down in teams, but when it is a simpler interaction, you
Mhm.
are able to have more personal touch, more conversation time, more just, it's a slower pace. And I think that that is a breeding ground for love to be exchanged. So really great, brilliant, brilliant like content there, Charity. I want to ask, you have like kind of highlighted a lot of like factors and things to think about, but what are some more key factors when you're planning Easter outreach, like that maybe applies to all of it, whether it is a special needs egg hunt or foster care makeover or whatever that is? What are some factors that like kind of are woven throughout it all that kind of like make or break the whole thing to you?
Um, yeah, so I think like we were talking about earlier, is simple communication. I find so we touched on it earlier about my involvement with human trafficking work. So obviously that's an outreach that requires training and things like that before. I don't recommend launching out. And because of that, it's being strategic on those types of outreaches. Because you're going to have a lot of people maybe have never served before or who are not particularly church. They may have heard about it at church, but they don't know our Christian church ways of serving and things, keeping it simple. So maybe not an outreach that requires 4 weeks of training, it's been things that I've tried, it's simple that you can show up, get the information and go. You do have to build a core team, of course, when you're planning outreaches, and depending on the size of your church. I know some of the larger churches, it may be 1,000, 2,000 people involved, or maybe 30. Either way, you need a core team that will require planning. But overall, if you can make it simple, I always give margin for people to show up if it's a sign up outreach. So I always make sure that I have some margin there. So I think, okay, I have 100 volunteers showed up. There's probably 50 who will come that didn't sign up, or in reverse, 50 signed up and 100 showed up, which is usually more likely what happens. But having that, even some backup outreaches. So creating outreach. So if you're doing adopt a block, saying, we're going to go hand out Easter baskets on these 5 streets, but I'll have 10 available, and have all the supplies ready, just to create margin again for new people. When someone's newly serving it, we don't want them to feel that it's too difficult, or that that they're embarrassed because they didn't know what we all know about getting on planning center and checking in, or those types of things. So communicating one click signups, one click information. I know there's the serve app. There's some great tools that are out there that makes it very, very simple. Daily communication. If you can do live streaming, that's awesome. Or having social media updates daily. Even some of the pastors doing that is really great, because it's people that faces that people are familiar with seeing. Just to be able to say we're live out here in this outreach, just a kind of constant communication, because nowadays people will look to that for sure. One thing I think has been great is you know color coding things as much as possible, which may sound something like taking something you use in kids ministry, but it's been really helpful for me when you have lots of supplies and lots of people, having purple team and blue team, or changing it if you have adults, they may want, different names has been great. Just as, really, really simple, is I think a big win for volunteers. I think
So
social
color
media,
coding, you mean like literally naming a team
yeah,
in
yeah,
okay.
team, or yeah, so they know that, like, go to the, like, if we're doing a rally beforehand. I know Tori and I've done rallies together over the years, and maybe like, hey, you're going to be in the purple with the purple balloon. So make it simple, because if you imagine, and I remember this, and sometimes, especially us outreach workers have been in a long time, we take a lot of things for granted, and just know things. But imagine if you've never done a serve at all, which you'll get a lot of that, and it's so new. You may not know a lot of people. You're showing up, and if you have, like, here's a five-page thing to read, and then, and you meet, and you go talk to Sally, she's over in the front right, and by the way, it's like, whoo, it's a lot. So I think very, very simple, is the best. I think your team leaders doing communication. Some things do require handouts, and I always had handouts, but I think just as simple as possible, I think, is a win. And social media communication, daily. I think if you can have set times, if you're doing a serve week, one little tip is having the same times, so people know every day at 12 and 5 outreaches are going out. So if I don't, if I don't remember how to sign up or where to go or what to do, I know if I show up at 12, and sometimes volunteers will just show up every day and saying, hey, what's happening this day, and things like that. So that's great for a serve week, because it's hard for us, to keep all the details together if you're serving. So I'd recommend, as a leader, not assigning yourself to one particular outreach. Whether you're a volunteer leader or a staff person, make sure you can float and support your other team leaders. So I always felt, as a leader, a lot of times, even though I loved the actual outreach and being with the people, I wanted to make sure the team leaders were encouraged. So I think it's a simple thing. I only say that because, especially some of us who are more administrative than others, we can get lost into the weeds of it. And I think to pull out of the weeds is really important to be successful, especially if we're going to do a serve week, and especially during a week of Easter where there's a lot of volunteers.
Yeah. Man, these are very practical tips. I love that. And I think it's going to add so much value to our guys, just like to get their head around things. And it's really encouraging too. Like I had a meetup today with some church leaders who were planning their Easter outreaches. And it's a lot, especially bouncing back from COVID, or still kind of in the middle of COVID. And it's like, where do we go? What do we add on? And I also, we talked about just the encouragement of like, go slow with it. Don't feel like you have to recreate what you did 2 years ago, or try to make it to the same exact level as it used to be. Like, no, like, it's okay to keep it simple so that it can be valuable. And like you said, the volunteer experience is very important. I think sometimes for someone like us, who we're naturally an outreach person, we're naturally like, all right, what are the needs that need to get met, all this stuff, it's easy for me to forget the importance of the volunteer experience. I'm like, well, they can get over it. If they're uncomfortable, you're here to serve. But that's not true, because my job as an outreach leader is to help them unlock their own spiritual gifts, their own spiritual senses, to be able to be activated and loving. And so I love that you said, kind of like, I don't need to be in the weeds that day. I need to be kind of tinkerbelling around. How's it going? Architecting the atmosphere, making sure that that tone is set. So really great thoughts there, Chair. Okay, so I want to jump into, let's see. Yeah, there's so many opportunities. Like, you've given us such a wide array of ideas and people groups and things to look at. And obviously every community is going to have different needs. It's going to be different. But how would you guide a church who's like, all right, we've got a blank slate. I
Yeah.
remember JP Brumfield sat me down with a blank calendar one day and said, Servolutions in a month or whatever time. I need you to fill up 10 days of ideas right here, right now. So me and my friend Jamie, we just sat there and that's how the special needs egg hunt came to be. Like we literally were just sitting at a desk with a blank calendar and we wrote out all the ideas we could think of.
That's
And that's when
awesome.
she came up with. So shout out Jamie Doyle. Good idea. It's
Woo,
hysterical.
the best.
Um, but maybe that's not the best strategy. It worked that time. But what would you tell a church who's like, there's the sky is the limit. COVID needs to be a factor, obviously. But where how do you know what opportunities to say yes to, where to go? You want to blast the word out. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, just like you I think it's funny because the story you're describing is often how often it happens that way, and I think, like, again, sometimes the simplicity of that is good, like, because I think, again, there is a side to me that says, "Okay, we're gonna solve hunger, and how can we do that?" You know, and, all that is important, but I think in this outreach, really finding, okay, what are ways to remember the forgotten? What are opportunities in our city, that isn't there? Where's a gap? So there's usually a friend of mine who does some great training and anti-trafficking work. She always says that there's three different things. It's how can I come alongside an existing effort? Where's the gap that I can fulfill, and then how can I add on? So basically, how can I go to a homeless shelter and provide volunteers? Or is there a need for another homeless shelter? This is a big picture for a second. I'll tie it into Easter for you. And then, or where's the gap? So those are the three things that I've always filtered through my mind, and she articulates so well. So when it comes to Easter, and what is the vision of your pastor at that time? Is he wanting to, I remember Pastor Jimmy saying, at I-5, I want to fill some gaps in the community. So I was thinking, okay, man, what are some things that aren't happening? Like a special needs Easter egg hunt, things like that aren't happening in our community that we can really fill a gap. And a simple way to do that is just to go ask. And again, this is something we all know as outreach workers, but sometimes I even have to remind myself this when I've been on it, been on different new projects to say, go into someone and say, how can we serve? These are some ideas we have, but how can we serve? And so whatever your community looks like, if you say, I want to fill a gap, or I want to come alongside, or I want to send volunteers, say, how can we serve? Literally that question for me has worked in, national meetings where there's huge meetings about how can we serve on a national level to, your local school, to your neighbor, even an adopt a block. So I think that is the biggest thing to do, and also trying to always tie it into the vision, so the vision of the church, that 100,000 feet vision that the church has, and then how can I weave that into Easter as a teaching opportunity, for volunteers to be able to continue to embrace that vision and to grow in that and kind of pastoring them through that. So I've used it, like, to be able to launch initiatives. If it's, like I said, if it's something before, if there's something coming up, like launching a homeless ministry, or using it as a great opportunity to be able to do that. So I think when it comes to filling up a calendar for a serve week, I would have those conversations with your internal team and say, okay, do we want to use this opportunity to come alongside a bunch of different organizations and support? There's some churches who do that really well. I know Elevation Church kills it when it comes to that. I'm coming alongside and serving. So I think there's that. Or do we fill a gap? What is our culture? What is our DNA? What does that look like for us? I know when we were at Heal in Place, we were outreach to everything, everywhere. So we did a bunch of different things. And so it would be a broad, unique schedule. That there's specific focuses, I think that is that. And I think the biggest thing is there's not a right or wrong to it, if that makes sense. So outreach is very unique, and it's a lot like the mission field in the sense of, like, when outreach it's very broad. So for example, in, say, kids ministry in the church, there's some things, there's those non-negotiable things, a specific pathway, a vision you're building your kids ministry, or with outreach, it's almost like a wide open field. So it's kind of deciding, do we want to be wide open? Do we want to focus on the thing? But I always go into the covering of the vision. So what is the vision, and kind of knowing where you're at as a church at that time. So what is that? What is that? What are we trying to promote? And as far as and cast vision about, and knowing, what that looks like.
So deep and so good. Yeah, I love that you're kind of highlighting like outreach. For people who are in it, they know, but it's to me, it's like there's so much going on simultaneously.
Yeah.
Like, that is the weird thing about it. It's like
Mm,
I'm thinking about the community, I'm thinking about the volunteers, I'm thinking about the needs, the felt needs, but the actual big picture needs, and like how are people there's a lot of factors to it. But
yes.
like you said, the beauty is like there's not necessarily a right and wrong, just so long as the love of Jesus is moving
Yeah.
forward and you're following the Holy Spirit, it's cool. Like he's gonna make sure it works.
Yeah.
But it there is just so much going on simultaneously, and so, like you said, to be able to know the vision, to
Mhm,
know, like, where's the favor? What
mhm,
are we trying to accomplish in this particular season? Maybe not forever, but just right now, like, where are we at? What's going on? And then, again, unlocking the hearts of the people in the church is going to elevate your vision. Like,
mhm,
what they see is a factor in the whole thing, what the needs and the life that they're surrounded with, the just the community they're placed in their own day-to-day world, it contributes to the vision as a whole. So you can't even see, you have blind spots. I mean, everyone does, but like until you can look into that heart, you're not even getting a whole picture. So that's exciting to me. Like, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? And it's going to elevate the whole action plan.
mhm.
So really brilliant thoughts there, Charity.
One thing,
Okay.
Tori, I was gonna think, I
Yeah.
forgot to mention, I'm sorry, when you said that too, is I think, like I think you touched on a little bit, but building on the strengths of your church. So, also knowing for especially big outreaches and like all call serves. So for example, back in the day at HBC, there was a cookie ministry that was really, really big. So, to be able to utilize that. So knowing, so I would say some of the culture of your church. And so I know when I was at I-5, there was a lot of military and they had particular skill sets, and planning and different things. And so yeah, knowing even internally, just to kind of know what are the strengths within our church and to be able to build on that and to highlight maybe some of those areas.
Yeah,
Um,
I remember you told me that's great. I remember you told me at I-5 once that didn't you put out like a survey just to figure out what are your professions, what are your gifts so that you could know what you're working with? Can you
Yes, you can. You can do that. You can. A lot of the database systems, if you're using one nowadays, most all of them, I know there's Church Community Builder and Planning Center, all of them you can custom code to see. A lot of people when they go through discovery class, they'll or whatever the new membership class is, there's questions you ask about career and things like that. But yeah, you can send out an assessment through that system or, you know, you can take it and depending on the size of your church, you can do it in church, where they text different things. You can, yeah, and you can kind of get an assessment on what the strengths of are your church. Because I really think when it comes to, again, bigger picture, but solving problems in the community, knowing what's in your hands. So if you want to tackle something, I keep saying hunger as an example, like hunger, what does the health community look like in your church? Just knowing all the different factors that are there and to kind of know what the flavor is of your church. So I've been involved with churches who are great with grants and some that are not. It depends on, strength of the church and the vision. So I think that's an important thing to look at. And I know with the special needs Easter egg hunt was a great outreach that really played into, I think, the strength of the church too, as well. And the kids ministries and things like that. And looking at those other areas as assets, your greeters and your kids ministry volunteers, all those activities duplicate in outreach. So, you need people that have the personalities who love greeting to be there and the kids ministry. And a lot of times the musicians, those strengths you have in the church can work outside the church as well. And so that's great to be able to use that time to pull in those different volunteers.
That's a really great thought too. Knowing what's in your hand is huge. I think it was Alicia Henley at Life Point Church I interviewed a while back, and I
Mm,
remember her talking about like the importance for her of involving the church staff in teams in outreach. Like what serve expressions can we design for y'all to be able to use your talents and your gifts and your anointing? And that's so cool to me because a lot of times I've seen it done where it's like, hey, here's the church all call and staff is encouraged to serve, but it's like that's cool, but they would be utilized in such a more beautiful way if we are strategic in connecting and intentional connecting those dots, like they can really shine in different
yes.
ways. So
And they're
knowing
needed because they can do things that we can't,
that,
like they have gifts that I don't,
yeah,
and so I think that they not only can be involved in it, but they elevate it. And
right.
some of the event planning teams, are amazing for big events that are in the church, whether the people who are planning women's events and things like that. Nobody can plan women's events like the women's ministry team. And so I think just their eye for things is huge and helpful to have. And I think knowing as an outreach person, at least I could say for me, I don't know if you feel this way, Tori, but as an outreach person, I know there's things I will do because I live and breathe it 24/7. So, you can drop me off at midnight and I will knock on that, that house door and hand out roses and chocolate and pray with somebody. But not everyone, that's their thing. It's going to, and so I think sometimes these opportunities are great, even for our own church staff to realize, oh man, I can use my gifts and be a part of it. It doesn't mean I have to go out at midnight, and knock on doors and hand out roses and things like that. And so it kind of gives them, because outreach is very, there's so much that's needed and people don't always see that. So it's a great opportunity. Mhm.
Yeah, that is brilliant, brilliant perspective. I think that's so cool. Just and that's what our job is to be able to just call that beauty out of each person and show them their place in God's kingdom. And yeah,
Mhm.
to be able it takes a lot of awareness. Like we have to have on our peripheral vision. We have to be thinking in so many different dimensions and layers. And it's not just can I have the most creative idea? It's
Right.
not that simple. I wish
Yeah.
it was. And
Mm-mm.
that's cool, sometimes a creative idea sparks it, but just to be able to think through all the layers
Yeah.
of it and who needs to be in this mixture. I love there's a verse, I don't remember the reference, but it talks about like how God works us into his most excellent
Mhm.
harmonies. And I
That's
think that's so cool because it's
mm,
just like that is what we get to be part of seeing happen. And I think that's when it really glorifies him the most. So really
that's
cool thoughts.
mhm.
Okay. Next question. I'm kind of shifting gears a little bit. Um, I get a lot of questions about just volunteer training and how do I prepare my people for outreach, especially like you said, you are going to have a lot of first time people, you're going to have a lot of youth probably.
Mhm.
What are some best practices you prepare them with when it comes to serving as a new volunteer?
Yeah, so I think for me, I've always made sure that we have good training opportunities on the spot the day of outreach. So you want your I would say your do's and don'ts, the training part to be simple enough that they can remember it. So I think that's another thing. I have at times overcomplicated it in the past and had all these things, and you'll have people coming back to you, or maybe get frozen. Like, am I supposed to do this? Am I not? So making sure that there's no more than 3 or 4 things that they have to keep in their head at the time. And I think I would do it with every outreach in general, just by the nature of a lot of the outreaches we did, but especially on these for Easter outreaches, just that 20 minutes before that, outreach say starts at 10, gathering people at 9:30, letting people know to gather to pray and give those just those hot button items and keep it fresh in their mind is really, really important. I think as far as things I've always said is make sure and keep a smile on your face if you see something that you haven't seen before that's not familiar, to maybe your world, just to be aware of your face if with everything you do, depending on what types of outreaches you do, and, debrief with somebody afterwards. I always recommend a team leader to debrief with everybody immediately following, just because I think for some people, when you're exposed and it's new, I know one volunteer was actually one of the pastors on staff at a church, and they went on outreach and it touched them and they were just crying all night. They didn't know what to do with the information, just broke them. And so talking to them the next day, and I thought to myself, man, it's important, that important moment of debriefing, because people are going to see those needs or see different things and they're going to take it with them, especially right now. I think in the season that we're in with COVID, there's just so much going on around us and so many hardships people are facing. I think that is really important. But I think, yeah, keeping to the 3 or 4 rules that are relevant and do's and don'ts to your outreach. I think keeping that smile is really important. And there's a whole list of ones depending on what the outreach could be. But I think that is, I don't know if that answers your question, Tori, but that's kind of what I do. I haven't done a lot of prep as far as training. Some team leaders love to do it, and I've always let them like have that creative freedom to do it. So some of them may get their volunteers together ahead of time and things like that, and so letting people have their kind of their own flavor with that. But I think keeping the most importance of just kind of training and prep to the day of outreach for the volunteers, I think will keep it fresh, and it'll be the most effective.
That's very true. And
Mhm.
I think about how I was trained, and honestly, it was like riding in the car with you. Like it
Mhm.
wasn't so much what was the 3 steps, and yeah, of course I'm not gonna go off alone.
Right.
obviously you have to say that because people
Yes.
will, but for me, it was like when you have those teams, you're able to have that narrative in that moment, and so as things are happening, you're able to point out to me, "Hey, this is what's going on behind the scenes, and you're 14, you've never seen this before. Okay, let's get in the car and let's talk about it." And I think that we've lost a lot of that just in like our social media world and our marketing world. Like getting back to that personal coaching is very cool. Um, and yeah, the debrief thing is very important. I think we forget that as well. It's like, okay, we got to rally up, but the after is harder to do because people are like ready to go to lunch, whatever. But
Mhm.
again, the debrief to me could be the most important part
Mhm.
because it's a follow up, it's a story, it's processing, and you're able to again narrate, help them create their narrative and how they go home. And you know, if especially street outreach, there could be some culture shock, there could be some, I don't want to go back to that again, but if you're able to get in there and lead and coach, then it's like, oh, I see that differently. Okay, cool. So that's very good. Like that's not one that I had on my radar lately, so thank you for refreshing that. That's awesome. And smile.
Really, in a
30.
nutshell, Tori, we're kind of pastoring people through it,
Yeah,
there's a pastoral role with play and outreach, which we don't always think about it, is pastoring through. And I think when it comes to like giving the do's and don'ts and the debrief, which is sometimes the little bit more boring part of the day, pulling in your youth ministry team is great because if you can make it fun, as exciting as possible, they'll kind of look forward to those moments. It helps, you know.
that's
So
awesome.
little tip.
That's a good point. I think about Jason Laird when he led an outreach. Everybody wanted to be there. It was going to be a blast. You never knew what was going to happen. Yeah, pulling those youth guys, they're fun. That's
Exactly.
genius.
Mhm. Yep.
I love it. Okay, one more big question, and then I'm gonna kind of jump into just like some of the little wrap up things. But man, I have so many more questions I had to skip because this is so good. We need to do a sequel. I say that a lot, but for real, we need a whole charity series.
Oh man.
Okay, one thing that I wanted to ask about is I'm gonna make it a compound question. I'm gonna try to get to it. One is the heart of outreach. A lot of times, like you said, people are more open to come to church.
Mhm.
That's fantastic. We want them to come to our services and meet Jesus if they haven't yet. So the twofold question is the heart of outreach around Easter simply to get people to church? Is that the goal? Why? And then the second thing is we are going to be blasting the city. We're going to be inviting people. How do we help our church prepare to receive so many visitors from different areas, from different walks of life? I know with the Easter egg hunt that we did for families with special needs kids, children with special needs, sorry, gotta be PC. Um, we had to make sure like we thought, I don't remember if we had thought about it yet or if it was kind of a surprise, but it was like, what are the handicap entrances, or like is it wheelchair accessible, where are these families going to be able to sit, do we have buddy systems in place for our kids ministry? Like there's just obviously at Easter you put on your best, you get all the there's pastel greeters hiding in the bushes, they're like munchkin land, there's balloons, it's a crazy, you're trying to be the best host, but especially in light of what communities did we reach
Mhm.
and who should we prepare for on a Sunday? Can you speak to those factors? The
Yes,
separation
definitely,
part?
for sure. And hey, by the way, Tori, I'm always up for a sequel, but I could talk about outreach all day. Like you said, you can when you get into it, it's like the tip of the iceberg, isn't it? There's so much to talk about. But I think when it comes to preparing on Sunday, a couple of tips of things I've experienced or I've been a part of leading over the years is if some of your key outreach people who, especially ones who have been visible on the outreaches and may not be the leaders and maybe the volunteers, maybe having them in their serve shirts at church on Sunday. So if somebody comes and they're new, it's like, okay, I remember the serve shirt. It automatically makes them feel comfortable. I think is really important. If there's, so for instance, one of the serve weeks we did at I-5, we were launching our homeless ministry, which for the church, it was just a new ministry. So some of our family, our friends from the community that we reached out to is preparing the Sunday teams, if it's something that's, whether it's culturally different, demographically different, just different things that may be not something that they've been known or exposed to, depending, your church may be where it may be placed, that may be your entire church, so it may be, and, whatever that is, if it's something that's maybe a little bit different than they're used to, is preparing the Sunday teams, with those kind of things, and how to know and help them to be able to serve well. And then having outreach people there and visible at the door, depending on what type of outreaches you're doing. We've done grocery giveaways. I think water giveaways are great, depending on where you're at right now in the US, if it's still going on Sundays, so that it kind of gives them something, another next step to go to. Because I think sometimes with people, when we're interacting outreach, I always look at outreach as a way to bring hope. It's ultimately about bringing hope and a lot to people. And I think when you're walking around and you are in a big amount of hopelessness, sometimes it's such a big step for church. So giving them a practical reason, even for themselves, helps them, maybe gets them in the door. So they maybe, because of maybe they're not quite there and they still feel hopeless in their situation, or, they may just to go to church on their own, just to go to church, but they may think, man, I can get a hot meal or grocery or some water. Okay, I'll come. So even beyond, it's not even necessarily like we're going to lure you, to get you to church. It's even more for them, to give them a reason, a practical reason to be able to do that. Because I think, we build hope upon hope, in our lives. And so I think depending where someone's at, that sometimes is huge. So an outreach on the Sunday, I call it an outreach, but a giveaway of some point of some sort is helpful.
I love it. That's brilliant. It makes so much sense. I didn't even think about the serve shirt thing either. That is really, really smart. So
Mhm.
such a simple thing. It
Yeah.
just makes all the world of a difference. I love that thought, Charity. Okay, we're coming up on an hour, so I have to like pick and choose my final questions. It's so hard. Um, okay, let me just give you like space. Is there any like thing that you feel is pertinent that our outreach guys, our listeners should know? Any other tips that you want to add in?
Yeah. Oh man. Um, I think something that's been a lifeline for me as I've been in outreach, because as you launch out and you step out, and some of you guys are pros, have been doing it for years, some of you are new, but I think knowing what the scripture says in 1 Corinthians 13, excuse me, love never fails. So when I've, maybe had moments of insecurity in what I've been planning, and I've thought, man, is this going to even be helpful? Or, I've never walked through maybe what some of the people we're serving have walked through. What do I know? Just that scripture, love never fails, is so important. And I think if we purely love people with the love of God, the outreach is not going to fail. Even if we feel like it failed or didn't come how we planned, that, love will really pierce the soul of that person. And I think that's something that's been a lifeline. It's been a scripture. Remember, I encourage all outreach people, you can stand on that. I have a piece of art that has it on it. It's just something that's been helpful for me to say, okay, it is fail proof if we love people, and just like 1 Corinthians says, everything else will fall away, prophecies and all these other things that we do, but love will not fail. So I think if you do that, if you do that well, whatever method or vehicle you use to reach people, whether it's simple or complex, it'll work. And I think there's one outreach story, just to give an idea of that I always is in my mind. This was years ago in Louisiana. I knocked on the door to hand out groceries. We were doing adopt a block. And this is just a real way to explain the scripture. And I don't know what we had in the bag, Tori. And it could have been anything. We would hand out anything. I know Pastor Dino's told that story many times. I don't even know what was in the bag. You know, it might have been hominy. To this day, I'm not sure what hominy is, but we would hand that out if we had it. And I knocked on the door, gave it to her. I did, and I remember, vaguely remember the house, and it was just one of a sea of houses. And then a few weeks later, this woman stopped me on the road. She said, you knocked on my door so many weeks ago and gave me these groceries, and I just felt that you cared. And I thought to myself, if you care, then people in the world must care. And she said, I was smoking weed all the time. I ran away from home when I was 16. She was in her early 20s, had a whole bunch of stuff going on, grew up in an abusive home, living in a bad situation. And she thought, you know what? If she cares, that means people care. So my life is I felt like I have more value now. So she quit smoking weed and went to college. And it was literally, I hadn't seen her. She was starting enrolled in community college. And I was just so blown away by that. And obviously some people, you walk through more than that. But just that moment was a spark. And so that was a real love never fails moment. I think if you do that well, you may not, in outreach, so many times you don't get to see the other end of it. You don't always see it. You plant the seed, and you just know, and you trust in God that scripture's a promise that it will not fail. And you never know on the end of it. You may be as lucky as I was to run into somebody years later and hear that, and hear. So I think it's just powerful. I think that's something to remember above all.
That is insane and so beautiful.
Mhm.
Hominy led to going to college. That's
Yes,
amazing.
exactly.
I
Yes.
love that so
Yes, and
much.
encouragement for all the churches that are just starting. Sometimes you can look at churches. I know I've been involved with small churches and large churches. That's why that scripture is so important for everybody. Because if you as a church just have a few dollars and a bunch of people with hearts, you can change the world. You can do anything. And so I think, yeah, so all of you out there, it works. It's the one outreach method that works for everybody.
Fail proof. I
Mhm.
love that so much. That is the best advice ever. Thank you. It's so encouraging. Thank you for all of your wisdom today. Thank you just for, I don't know, man, you're like, you could be anywhere spending time with like all the big dogs and whatever, but you're just investing in us. And it's such a blessing for real. Um,
Um,
you have given us a lot to go chew on for sure. Um, okay. One more thing, 2
yes.
more things. Recommend something. What are you reading? What are you listening to? What should we check into?
Man, there's a resource out there. It's called engagetogether.com. It's something that I've um, interacted with in the past few years. It's a great resource. They do a lot of anti-trafficking work, but they also do protecting the vulnerable. They have toolkits out, some great toolkits that are specific in areas, particularly in the area of just foster care and different things. If there's a great toolkit, so that and a lot of resource. They have a blog. They're great. Engagetogether.com is a great one. Man, this is going to sound very over spiritual, Tori, but when it comes to, and it's not, but when it comes to books right now, I've actually stopped reading a lot of books and just said, I'm going to go back into the Bible in another level. I felt like it was a season I really need to focus that and learn at another level how to hear from God in the Word. And so there's some people I listen to, different sermons and things, but I've gone back to, I'm going to read the Bible forward, back to forward, and say, God, speak to me. And I don't have a specific book right now, but the serve books are really awesome. The second serve book, I know that everybody knows about it, but I think that is an amazing resource. But I think, those are to engage together is amazing. Some of the toolkits are putting out is blowing my mind. And then for me is I'm going back to again, I think it's something I encourage people to do. It's good. One thing that's been awesome for me in the past couple of years is the things I pull out that I hadn't pulled out before. And so I think that's just a new area. I'm trying to think sermons, people, this
No,
podcast, of course, shameless plug for all things Servolution. Man, I think that is, I think those are the main things. I think there's so much happening right now with an outreach world. I'm trying to narrow it down to some. I think those are good. I think check out Engage Together I think is a good one. Shout out
perfect.
to them.
No, that's exciting. I think that's gonna be a fantastic resource for our guys to go check out, and the Bible is a good one, Charity. Like, that's a pretty good recommendation. Thank you. I'll definitely check it out. I probably should crack that one open. Oh my gosh. Okay, how can we find you? Are you on social media? You got your own website? What you got?
Yes, I don't have my own website. That's fun. But social media, I'm Life of Charity. You can check me out. I am getting more and more into social media because of the nature of some of the outreaches I've done over the years. I've been a little bit low key on social media. But a good thing about social media for me is I will respond. So if you reach out or something, I'll respond. If you DM me on Instagram or Facebook, it's charity-Paul Trahan. My husband and I share a Facebook page. Those are the main ways. If you forget all of that, if you track down Tori, she'll track down me anytime. Anything I can do to come alongside and support, I will do that.
Perfect. Thank you so much. You said you respond, so now we're gonna hold you to it. You're gonna get like
Yes.
a flood of people. Oh man. Cool. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Charity. This has been a blast. We will definitely have to do mini sequels.
Yeah.
And listeners, thank y'all so much for jumping on. I hope y'all have the best Easter serve of your life. Love never fails. So just go forth and prosper, right?
Thank you, Tori. It's been an
we,
honor. Go
we love
team.
Go
Woohoo.
team.
Easter.
Yeah. See y'all next time on the Surf Brew. Bye.